Welcome to the Mixed Zone, a weekly review of news from the world of Olympic sports and around the rings. I'm Ed Hula.
And I'm Gerard Farek. Coming up today, the flame for the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics is about to be lit. The IOC gets ready to choose a host for the 2036 Olympics, while Spain sets its sights on the Winter Olympics. And John Coates calls Tokyo 2020 the greatest Olympics of all. But first, let's go to some Olympia festivities coming up here in the next couple of days. What's happening?
Well, Greece is going to be the center of action this weekend for the IOC executive board meeting scheduled in Athens on Saturday afternoon, their time. A short meeting, 2 hours long. We're not exactly sure what, if any, decisions will come out of that, but they're supposed to review upcoming games, reports on the various sports federations, updates. Again, as I say, no indication that there'll be any kind of decisions coming out of that meeting. And it's an in-person meeting. The EB has been meeting virtually for most of the past year and a half, but they're starting to make the transition into in-person meetings. On Sunday, the executive board will travel to Olympia in the Peloponnese and take part in ceremonies to christen the renovations that have been carried out at the International Olympic Academy. And then on Monday, the flame lighting for the Beijing Winter Olympics with no spectators on hand. In fact, I believe police have been summoned to Olympia to make sure that the city or village is essentially locked down and to prevent people from coming in. The Winter Olympic flame lighting is a pretty low-key affair compared to what happens with the Summer Olympics. The only one that I went to was in 2001, in November 2001, ahead of the Salt Lake City Olympics. And the weather out there on the Peloponnese in November was kind of iffy, very cold and blustery. And I didn't check the weather forecast for this coming Monday, but it's can be changeable out there. And then finally, the last time Beijing did this for the 2008 Summer Olympics was a day fraught with protests, confusion, and a bit of mayhem in Olympia from protesters and the torch relay. And they want to make sure that nothing like that happens with the Winter Olympic flame that's going to be lit on Monday. 2 days later, it's off to Beijing, off to China, and we really don't know what's supposed to happen. There's no plans for a torch relay that have been announced, but the flame will be on its way to Beijing to sit and rest and think and cogitate, I guess, a while, kind of like they did it for Tokyo and when that got postponed. So that's the rundown on what's happening there in Athens and Olympia over the weekend. It'll be, the inexorable march towards the Winter Olympics, marked by the lighting of the Olympic flame.
Well, as we look forward to the very next Olympic Games, we've got a very far in the future 2036 Olympic process. Bidding process can get underway now.
Yeah, right. With the naming of a chairwoman for the commission that will look at the cities that are interested in bidding for 2036. That's from Croatia, Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic, who was until 2020 president of the Republic of Croatia, and the first year of her term on the IOC. She's a backbencher, but has a very high-profile position for someone who's very low in seniority on the IOC. But certainly her work in government affairs, international affairs, really puts her in a good position to be able to handle this 2036 Olympic process. And there's a few cities interested, but even before that, the search for the 2030 Winter Olympic host has got to take place first. And there's a few candidates for that, including Spain.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of interesting that Sebastian Fest, our editor-in-chief, interviewed Alejandro Blanco, the Spanish NOC president, and basically the 2036 Spain isn't even looking at a Summer Games possibility for Madrid. Again, Madrid bidding for a Summer Games. It wouldn't be the first time, would it? But
it would be the fourth time.
Fourth time. But no, they're looking at the Winter Games, a bid from, well, they can't even decide, unfortunately, because of the political setup in the country. They can't even decide on what to call it yet, but it would include Barcelona, the Pyrenees, Zaragoza. Well, they've got to come up with a name. I guess that would be a good start, but it's all tied in with the Catalonia versus the rest of Spain and some other things. So there's political issues there that are going to make it a little difficult to get off the ground. And let's say they work out those political issues. Then all they have left is to battle three heavyweights, potentially, for the right to host in 2030. I mean, you've got three cities, Salt Lake City, Vancouver, and Sapporo, who've already hosted before. And they're all in great shape as far as being able to host, as far as setting up all the technical aspects and having the venues and everything. They're all ready to go, I think. Salt Lake City, of course, isn't sure they're going to bid at 2030 or 2034. They've got to work out some details with Los Angeles in 2028 as far as marketing and all that goes. And then I guess some people might be put off having the U.S. host two straight Olympics. I mean, that's their drawback. Vancouver hosted in 2010, so it's only been 20 years. That's even less than 2002 in Salt Lake City. So they're even more recent, so their venues are all fine, you would think. But the problem, apparently, is that Vancouver's in on it. They're hey, that's great, but they don't want to lead. They don't want to be the leaders of this thing. So now they're looking at a regional bid. Maybe it'll end up with being British Columbia 2030 or something. But so they've still got some things to work out there. Sapporo, the only question about Sapporo, I think, I read recently the Sapporo mayor came out saying that he wanted to get public contributions as to what they think about a bid in 2030. Now, the dreaded R word, referendum, was not mentioned, but anytime you're looking for public consultations, that a lot of times that will send shivers up the IOC spine, because generally speaking, those don't go well. So there's that with Sapporo. And now Ukraine has come up and said, oh, we want to bid for 2030 as well. Obviously, that would be more of a long shot. But as you can see, Barcelona, it's a tough road ahead for Barcelona.
Yeah. And Alejandro Blanco, the NOC president, says he wants to keep politics away from this if possible, that this should be a bid for sport, should be a sports event. But he will have some tricky negotiations and tricky things to handle as this progresses. And 2030 is the next one. I mean, the IOC has kind of jumped the queue by picking Brisbane for 2032. But in terms of what's next for the IOC to decide on it would seem that figuring out what to do about 2030 Winter Olympics is next, sometime in the next year or two.
Yeah, and speaking of Brisbane, John Coates was certainly instrumental in getting a second Australian bid to come good to host an Olympics. What's he looking at? He's coming down toward the end of his tenure, correct?
Right. He's preparing his golden parachute, shall we say. He's already given notice in 2017 in his last bid for re-election that this would be his final term in office, and he will step down as AOC president in May next year after 32 years in office. He spoke this week to the National Press Club in Australia, an address that was carried on Australian ABC TV, the public broadcaster there. And he's planning to remain on the a board of the Australian Olympic Committee as a non-executive member, and as also a non-executive member of the board of Brisbane 2032. He will still be an IOC vice president for until 2004, so he'll maintain that seat, that position, and he's going to keep his finger in the pie for the coming years here. He is, obviously Australia's kingmaker as far as the Olympics go, and in the annals of bidding for the Olympics and hosting games, there's been nobody like John Coates to be able to be involved from start to finish for 2 Olympic Games. And he's certainly accomplished that with his wrangling of Brisbane 2032. So Coates, 71 years old, stepping down next year from the Australian Olympic Committee. Who will replace him? I mentioned in my story this week that Ian Chesterman, who's been chef de mission and vice president of the AOC, could very well be in line to take over from John Coates, but we'll know more about that as 2022 unfolds.
Yeah, and Coates, as you said, is sticking around with the IOC until 2024 as a vice president. But there are quite a few new IOC members coming on board here. Yeah,
and we just want to mention these names here. Really, only one of them, a couple of them will stand out, but the rest are a bit unknown. From Norway, these are the least, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members who are at the very bottom of the IOC seniority table. Astrid Urenholt Jacobsen from Norway. She was nominated to take over the term of the U.S. member who had stepped down.
Keegan Randall, yeah.
Keegan Randall from the Athletes Commission. Paul Gasol, the basketball great from Spain, was elected in Tokyo to the Athletes Commission, as was Yuki Ota. He's a fencing gold medalist. Federica Pellegrini, the great Italian swimmer, was another elected member in Tokyo, and also the 4th member selected in Tokyo, Polish cycling great Maja Loszowska. I'm practicing my Polish here, but she is now a member of the IOC for the next 8 years on the Athletes Commission. And then the final name here, Humphrey Kayangi, rugby sevens player from Kenya, 42 years old. He was nominated by the IOC president to balance out the Athletes Commission to include representation on the commission from all the continents. So Humphrey Kaiangi of Kenya is now 102 in seniority on the IOC. He's at the bottom of the list, which Seb Coe held, interestingly enough, until a couple of years ago when he was nominated. So those individuals will play a role in upcoming Olympic Games, selecting upcoming Olympic Games, and the influence of athletes so important on the IOC.
Yeah, and one further note before we leave it for this week, the USOPC Media Summit ahead of Beijing 2022 is coming up this week, and it'll be like the one ahead of Tokyo. It's going to be not in person. It'll be virtual, but they will have the USOPC leadership and some of the athletes available.
Yeah, we cover these. We've attended these before when they've been held in person. 200-300 journalists from all across the U.S. and sometimes abroad have come to these meetings. They've held them in Salt Lake City, in Los Angeles most recently, and it's a good way to get up close and personal with members of the U.S. team. But the COVID countermeasures have really forced everybody into new ways of doing things, and it's certainly the case with the USOPC Media Summit. In some ways, a much more efficient way to operate. It's very difficult and expensive to get 100 plus athletes all together in the same place at the same time, and this way, probably a little bit more convenient, a little bit less hectic for the athletes, and a little bit easier for the journalists not to have to make the journey across the country. But next Monday and Tuesday, we'll be hearing from members of Team USA and the Team USA leadership, and we'll be reporting here at Around the Rings for sure.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this week's Mixed Zone from Around the Rings. I'm Gerard Farek.
And I'm Ed Hula. Thanks for joining us today, and let's hear from you. Comment at aroundtherings.com is where you can find us. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Adios.